Okay, today we're going to look at Brooklyn Cop, and I'm going to again analyze it for you guys, help you prepare for your exam, etc. All right, let's look at it. All right, so again, this is Brooklyn Cop by MacCaig. Okay, you'll be doing this in your Scottish text if you're doing it, um, at Nat 5 or higher. And okay, so get ready, take some notes, etc. You know the deal. All right, so okay, let's get into it. All right, so it begins with, well, if I asked you, what do you think the poem's going to be about, just from the title? Obviously, the poem is about a cop, a police officer, where in Brooklyn. Obviously, it's in Brooklyn. So it's about a police officer in Brooklyn, and it's going to take a snapshot of his life in some way. It's going to give you an idea of what it's like to be him um, in this poem. That's the idea. Okay, so the first thing to write down, the setting is Brooklyn, and the poem is about a police officer in Brooklyn. Okay, so let's begin. All right, so it begins with built like a gorilla but less timid. So obviously this is talking about his physical, uh, physical appearance, what he looks like, and in terms of his physical strength. Gorilla obviously is a large animal which is strong. So obviously saying that the cop is very strong physically, and also a gorilla is a typically wild animal. You don't have gorillas as pets, for example. So it's also indicating that the cop is a wild person. Okay, he is not what you'd say tame in his nature. He's wild. Okay. And then this year, but less timid. Timid means to be shy, to be scared, afraid. So what this is doing in some way is it's sort of like, I guess, like some humor, something like that. Okay, what he's saying basically is that the cop is even more wild, even more scary, even more brave, and so on, than a gorilla, an ape. Okay, that's the idea. Okay. All right. So he goes on to say thick fleshed, again, meanings a lot of muscle, steak colored, skin tone, steak colored. People aren't obviously steak colored yet, so it, uh, it could be indicating that he's angry a lot of the time, which would give you that reddish type of color, if you get angry, something like that. It's not really important. Okay. With two hieroglyphs in his face. Excuse me. With two hieroglyphs in his face that mean trouble. Okay. So hieroglyphs are obviously the ancient Egyptian writing. Okay. And the thing about hieroglyphs is, what does it mean he's got them in his face? Uh, so it could be talking about his eyes, since there's two of them, obviously. But the thing with the ancient Egyptian writing, okay, is that for a very long time, it was a dead language, meaning that people couldn't understand it. Yeah. It wasn't until they found what's called the Rosetta Stone that they began to be able to decode. They began to be able to understand it. So the idea basically, very simply is that his face or the cop is hard to read. It's hard to read. It's hard to read him. He's sort of mysterious in a way. He's sort of yeah, he's like it's hard to read him basically. Yeah, just like it's hard to read that Egyptian thing that I just put on the screen a minute ago. Uh, but what you can know from him, from his energy, from his vibe, if you like, is that he means trouble, meaning that he's sort of like aggressive. He's like violent in some kind of way, and you're gonna see that in the poem. Okay, uh, which is that violence is one of the main sort of um, violence is one of the main like themes, main ideas in this whole poem. Okay. All right. Anyway, so what have we learned so far? Basically, the cop's a big guy. Big guy. He's kind of mysterious, but he's aggressive and maybe he's angry a lot of the time, something like that. Okay, so that's what we learned so far. Okay, and strong too. All right, good. He walks the sidewalk and the thin tissue over violence. Thin tissue over violence. He walks the sidewalk, meaning he walks the street, the pavement. Okay, and the thin tissue over violence. What does this mean? Okay, imagine. Okay, you have violence. Okay, which is in the city, as in there's violence everywhere. Okay, now if you put something over that violence, okay, then it means people can't see the violence. Yeah. The thing that the poet is saying here, the speaker is saying here, is that the thing which is covering the violence is extremely thin. It's a tissue, and tissues break easily, right? So what he's saying is that violence is everywhere, even if people can't see it, and it very soon, all the time, tissue breaks. Okay, meaning that violence pops up, and to many people it seems like they're taken by surprise, like they don't know where it came from. But to the cop, it's every day, yeah, it's every day. Violence pops up, breaks through the covering, the thin covering which is over it, and he has to deal with it. That's the idea. That violence is everywhere around him, and even if other people can't see it, when that violence breaks through and it shows itself, he is the one who has to deal with it. And because it's a thin tissue, okay, it means it will break through, it will appear. Violence is a constant in his life. Violence is something which he can't avoid. Does that make sense? Violence is not something that he can avoid. So what we're gonna see next, okay, is the consequence of this, or in other words, what does this lead to? And what that is basically is he says, okay, this morning when he said, "See you, babe," to his wife, he hoped it. He truly hoped it. Okay, what does that mean? It means that he recognizes that when he goes out to work, that it could be the last time he sees his wife, that he could die, basically. He could get shot or whatever. He could die outside because his job is very dangerous. That's the idea, okay? He could die. So, uh, now if we take this poem as a representation of real life, okay, this is why basically people have these kind of jobs where they're dealing with high stress or they're dealing with conflict, like a police officer, for example. Dealing with conflict, what happens to them is they develop these feelings uh, of PTSD, for example, where they have massive spikes of anxiety and they find it hard to deal with day-to-day life. Okay, they get massively stressed and everything like that. They also live day to day in some senses, as in they don't know if they're going to make it to tonight or to tomorrow, like a soldier or like a police officer in dangerous areas. They don't know if this is going to be the last time that they, uh, you know, if they see their loved ones and so on. And what that leads to, okay, this is sort of like a good sort of bigger picture point, is what this leads to is their personality shifts and changes and they become very sort of like jaded slash if you ever try to talk to a police officer, yeah, if you ever try to talk if you ever try to talk to a cop, yeah, even just generally, and I don't mean like to report a crime or something, but even just generally, you say hi or something, they have a very like aggressive, like they're describing this cop here, like the speaker is describing the cop here as being like a gorilla. They have a very like aggressive, stern, like almost like a gang member, yeah. Almost like a, almost like a, they have the same kind of thing, yeah. Almost like a flipping, like the same kind of vibe, yeah. Energy, yeah. Don't mess with me. Don't talk to me. I'll arrest you or I'll do something like that, yeah. Why is that? It's not because necessarily they're bad people. It's because continual exposure to the darkest parts of society, the darkest parts of the world, leads to sort of like a hardening of the heart or the mind. And the more the more you expose yourself to something, the more you come to believe the world overall is like that thing. Does that make sense? So, a quick point before I move on. Okay. You can imagine that the world is big, which is true. Okay. The world is very big, bigger than you think. Okay. And you are very small, as am I. Okay. We're also kind of small compared to the earth. Okay. So, when you look at the world, there's too many things to look at. Okay. There's too many things to look at one time. So, you can't look at them all. Okay. So what happens is you have to choose what you focus on, like a little window. That's called your perspective. Okay. Now, depending on which window you choose to look at the world through, will be your understanding of what the world is like. So for the cops, the police officers, so on, they constantly look at the world through the window of crime, violence, death, killing, rape, murder, etc. So for them, the world looks very dark. So when they meet you or anyone else who isn't like that, they will see you with those same eyes, or at least they'll be suspicious of you that you are, you know, you will be colored in that way. Does that make sense? Anyway, my point is, it's important not to choose your perspective properly because you choose the wrong perspective and you start to see everything through it, basically. Anyway, my point. Anyway, the point is, this is how the cop sees the world. Yeah, that's the point, basically. So he sees the world like this, which makes him act like this. Make sense? Okay, good. Anyway, he is a gorilla to him. Hi, honey, is no cliche. Ta ta ta. Okay, good. So now we go ahead and we see a little bit more of what his life is like, which produces his outlook on things. Should the tissue tear, which it will, obviously, because tissue is going to tear, should he plunge through into violence? So not only is it like he's presented with violence, as in it pops up in front of him, but he plunges into it. Plunge means like when you jump in a swimming pool or the water or something, the ocean, and you jump in and it covers you completely. That's plunge. So he every day is like this for him. Okay, he's getting thrown into violent situations, people trying to shoot him and so on. What clubbings? It doesn't mean clubbing like you go to the club, like nightclub. Doesn't mean that. Clubbing means like a big stick, that's baseball bat. Someone tries to hit you in the head with. What gunshots? Obviously, that makes sense. Excuse me. Between Phoebe's Whamburger, it's a takeaway something. Louis' place. I don't know what that is. I guess the point here is that these things are happening casually around takeouts or takeaways and like restaurants and stuff. It's not as if they're happening outside of the city in some random place, but they're happening right next to the McDonald's and the flipping kebab shop. It makes sense. People are getting shot like that, and he has to deal with it. That's what I'm saying. So the violence is everywhere. That's a big theme. The violence is everywhere. Okay. Excuse me. So it's saying if he gets killed, okay, if he actually dies in one of these incidents, then it asks the question, the speaker asks the question, okay, who would be him? Gorilla with a nightstick. So again, he has become a gorilla with a nightstick due to his job, due to his, like I said, perspective, which is based on his experiences, how he's seeing the world, the parts of the world that he's focused on, and the parts of the world he's continually exposed to, continually looking at. So now he is, if you notice as well, the cop isn't named. Okay, it's not named. He's not named, and he's never called like a man. Yeah, he's never called a human being. He's not called a man. He's always called a gorilla or something like that. And again, the idea is that he has, because of his experiences and so on, he has transformed. Okay, he's transformed, and he now, because he has to deal with violence every day, himself has become a violent person, like an animal with a weapon. That's the idea. Okay. Whose home is a place he might this time never get back to. We talked about that before as well, that he thinks he could die, or he could actually die because his job's that dangerous. And who would have to be? Now, this is written really strangely. I would recommend if you're going to use this, just write, and who would, and then skip this. Okay. Cut this out. Just do three dots. Say who would have to be his victims, like that. Cut this out. Who would be, and who would be, who have to be his victims? It's like written strangely. Um, yes. Anyway, the poem finishes here with the idea that he has victims. Okay, again, tying back to the idea that he has been exposed to so much violence, so much dark things, that he himself has now internalized that. Okay, he's now become dark in some kind of way. The famous quote from Nietzsche, be careful when you gaze into the abyss, because the abyss will also gaze into you. Another way of putting that basically, another way of putting that basically is that the more you fight monsters, the more you expose yourself to dark things and you're around dark things, the more dark essentially darkness inside of you is sort of brought out, or the more darker you become. That's the idea. Excuse me, which is what you see, yeah, which is what you see in reality in real life. And the fact that the cop isn't given a name, he's just called Brooklyn Cop, um, also would sort of indicate that this can and does, this idea what I'm explaining, this can and does happen to anyone. Okay, it can happen to anyone. So it's extremely important. Um, besides the poem is whatever, yeah, whatever. But it's extremely important, okay, for you to focus on what is your perspective, as in what window are you looking at the world through? Okay, because that changes everything, all right? Because that's a choice. Your perspective is a choice. It's a choice. So think about carefully what part of the world are you focusing on? What part of the world are you choosing to see? How are you choosing to see the world and other people? And that will greatly impact and change you in a massive way. Okay, anyway, um, very quickly, what quotes can you use? I recommend, okay, use this, built like a gorilla. It's one. Uh, you could use this, thin tissue or violence. There's two. You hoped it, you truly hoped it. There's three. Sh should you could either split these into, 4 and 5, or just take them as one. What clubbings, what gunshots? So we'll just say that would be four, maybe. Gorilla with the nightstick is five. And who would have to be his victims? That's six. There's six, okay? One, two, three, or three, four. It's up to you. Would you say three, four, five, six? There's six. Okay, key themes in this poem are obviously violence. That's like the main one, violence, and or crime. Those are your key themes. Okay, so there's your poem, sort of summary. There's your poem explanation. It's pretty simple. It's about a cop experiencing a violent life. But yeah, more important than the poem, just keep that in mind. Okay, the idea of the things you continually expose yourself to and how you choose to see the world will greatly impact your beliefs, your ideas, what you do, etc. If you believe you're in a war zone, okay, like some of the young brothers out there engaged in crime and so on, you believe you're in a war zone, you're gonna act like a soldier. Yeah. If you believe that you're in a peaceful environment, and maybe that'll take moving somewhere, but not really. More often than not, it's your perspective which is shaping you and not the reality. Okay, I know this because I grew up. I'm saying, yeah. So anyway, it's your perspective. Okay, it's not about me yet, but your perspective is greatly affecting you more than you think. Okay, so just think about how you're choosing to see the world and make it more positive. Okay, anyway, we'll stop there. Remember, you can get the whole entire in Nat 5 or higher course for free. Um, for free, just go to prepare to pass. It's in the description, yeah. You can get the entire Nat 5 or higher course, learn for free. Okay, share it with your friends. And yeah, that's it. When you pass, do something good with it. That's the whole idea. Okay, it's free, no catch. All right, take care.